Okay, let's really dive into this one. We're looking at a huge moment, right? A battle that just, oh, it changed everything.
Absolutely. Leipzig.
The Battle of Leipzig. Fought over, was it 4 days? 16 to 19 October 1813. A truly catastrophic scale.
4 days. And it really was the ultimate showdown. Yeah. Napoleonic France against, well, pretty much everyone else, it felt like.
Yeah, the rest of Europe, basically. This was the big one.
It's often called the Völkerschlacht.
Right, the Battle of Nations.
And that name really fits, doesn't it? Because if you need one single event to kind of capture that whole struggle against Napoleon's empire, this is probably it.
It wasn't just armies fighting armies, was it?
No. It felt like the whole continent just descended on Saxony for this final reckoning.
And to really get a handle on how significant this was, you first have to grapple with the sheer scale of it. I mean, the sources are clear on this.
Oh, yeah.
Before World War I, there was nothing like it. This was, without doubt, the largest battle ever fought in Europe up to that point.
The numbers are just. They're almost hard to believe, even now.
What are we talking about, total figures?
Okay, so you've got around 560,000 soldiers involved in total. 500,000 men, roughly.
500,000, just packed into one area over 4 days. Fighting, dying.
Marching, fighting, yeah. And supported by something like 2,200 artillery pieces.
2,200 cannons. That alone sounds like an entire army.
It's a huge concentration of firepower. And think about the ammunition.
Right. The sources mention something like 400,000 rounds of artillery ammo being fired.
400,000?
Yeah.
That level of sustained bombardment, that kind of industrialized killing, it was completely unprecedented for 1813.
This wasn't just skirmishing. It was mass destruction, pure and simple.
And the cost. The human cost.
It's appalling. A total of 133,000 casualties across those 4 days.
133,000. Think about the wounded, the dead, the logistical nightmare of dealing with that.
Yeah.
The sheer suffering. It's staggering.
Absolutely. And the stakes, politically and militarily, they just couldn't have been higher.
No. This battle was the culmination, really, of that whole German campaign of 1813.
Napoleon's control east of the Rhine. It was hanging by a thread, wasn't it?
It absolutely was. And Leipzig was the moment that thread just snapped.
Yeah. The defeat basically forced him back to France. It shattered his power base outside of France itself.
Forever, really. He went into this battle needing something, he was desperate. He needed a win, maybe even just a draw to stabilize things, get some kind of negotiation going his way.
But instead,
he ran headlong into the combined might of Europe. And they were in no mood to bargain this time. They were determined to finish it.
Okay, so to really understand why Leipzig happened and why it was so intense, we need to rewind just a little bit back to 1812.
Yes, absolutely. Because 1813, and Leipzig specifically, it all hinges on one massive event, the disaster in Russia.
Napoleon's invasion of Russia.
Exactly. That campaign in late 1812, it didn't just defeat the Grande Armée, it practically wiped it out.
Through what? Sickness? Starvation?
Sickness, starvation, the Russian winter, constant attacks from the Russian forces. It was a combination of everything. The veteran core of his army, the really experienced soldiers, they were just gone.
So he rushes back to France, raises a new army, but it's not the same, is it?
Not even close. It's mostly raw conscripts, young guys, hastily trained. It looked okay on paper, maybe, but it lacked that hardened experience.
And meanwhile, things aren't going well elsewhere either. The pressure wasn't just from the east, right?
No, definitely not.
Mm-hmm.
While everything's collapsing in Russia, the Western Front in Spain is also crumbling.
Wellington, yeah.
The combined armies of Britain, Portugal, and Spain, under his command, they'd smashed the French at Vittoria.
And they were pushing towards France itself.
Right, advancing towards the Pyrenees, actually pushing into southern France. So, the French are retreating on multiple fronts.
Yeah.
It's a disaster unfolding everywhere.
So this perfect storm of defeats, Russia and Spain, that created the opportunity.
Precisely. It gave the anti-French powers the chance, the momentum to really consolidate. And that's how you get the Sixth Coalition.
Which included who, again?
Oh, it was a big one. Russia, Austria, Prussia, Sweden, Britain, Portugal, Spain, plus a lot of smaller German states who were, frankly, eager to get rid of French control.
Okay, so the coalition forms. But Napoleon, even with his new, less experienced army, he's still Napoleon. He wins some battles in early 1813.
He does, yeah. He manages tactical victories at Lintzen and Bautzen, enough to get a temporary armistice, a pause in the fighting.
But the coalition uses this pause Very cleverly.
Incredibly cleverly. This is where the Trachenberg Plan comes in. They formalized it during that armistice.
And this plan is pretty brilliant strategically, isn't it?
It really is. It's more than just battlefield tactics. It's grand strategy, almost psychological warfare.
What was the core idea?
The core idea was simple, but required huge discipline. The main coalition armies would actively avoid fighting Napoleon himself.
Avoid Napoleon? That sounds counterintuitive.
Well, think about it. They recognized his genius, his ability to inspire his troops to win against the odds. So instead of risking a direct confrontation where he might pull off another Austerlitz,
They'd target his marshals instead.
exactly. Whenever Napoleon advanced with his main force, the designated Allied army would retreat. But other Allied armies would simultaneously attack the forces led by his marshals, Ney, Oudinot, MacDonald, guys like that.
So it's a strategy of attrition. Bleed his subordinates dry.
Precisely. Wear down his core, stretch his supply lines, exhaust his resources, attack his flanks, his rear, chip away at his strength until he's forced into a corner, unable to dictate the terms of battle.
That must have taken incredible coordination and discipline from the Allies. Sticking to that plan when the instinct is to fight.
It really did. It was revolutionary for the time, this acknowledgement that maybe you can't beat the big boss head on, so you systematically take out his lieutenants. And they stuck to it.
And it worked.
Oh, it worked beautifully. Adhering to the Trachenberg Plan led directly to key coalition victories: Grossbeeren, Kulm, Katzbach, Dennewitz.
These weren't just minor skirmishes. These were significant defeats for Napoleon's marshals.
Absolutely. Costly defeats. They didn't just lose men. They lost morale, cohesion. Napoleon's supply lines got thinner and thinner, stretched across hostile German territory. He was losing control.
And there was a political dimension, too, wasn't there, with Bernadotte?
Yes, Charles John, the Crown Prince of Sweden, formerly one of Napoleon's own marshals, Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte.
Right. Quite the turnaround.
He led a very effective propaganda campaign alongside the military strategy, encouraging German states and soldiers to defect.
And that had an impact even before Leipzig.
A significant impact. Bavaria declared neutrality. Crucially, Saxon and Westphalian units, supposedly Napoleon's allies, started mutinying or just walking over to the coalition side before the main battle even started. The rot was setting in.
So by the time Napoleon pulls his forces back towards Leipzig, trying to protect his supply lines and maybe force one big decisive battle,
he's already in a really bad spot. Strategically cornered, his army weakened, facing converging coalition armies that had systematically drained his strength, using this brilliant, disciplined Trachenberg blueprint. The stage was set.
Okay, let's talk about the forces actually gathering around Leipzig. The sheer imbalance is striking when you lay it out.
It's overwhelming, really. The coalition numbers are huge. We're talking roughly 380,000 troops.
380,000 and about 1,500 guns.
Yeah, around 1,500 artillery pieces. And it truly was a battle of nations in terms of who was there.
Break down those numbers for us.
Okay, you've got the biggest contingent from Russia, maybe 145,000, even 150,000 soldiers. Then Austria, around 115,000. Prussia sent between 75,000 and 90,000. And Sweden contributed up to 30,000 troops.
A massive multinational force. How were they organized?
Into four main army groups. You had the Army of Bohemia, the largest, under the Austrian Prince Schwarzenberg, who's nominally the commander-in-chief. Then the Army of Silesia, under the fiery Prussian Field Marshal Blücher. The Army of Poland, under the Russian General Bennigsen. And the Army of North Germany, under Bernadotte, or Charles John, the Swedish Crown Prince.
And wasn't there a British element too? Small but interesting.
There was, yeah. Within Charles John's army, there was a company from the British Rocket Brigade.
Armed with Congreve rockets.
Exactly, Congreve rockets. A little taste of future tech on the battlefield, even back then. Still pretty experimental, but definitely there.
Okay, so that's the coalition. Nearly 400,000 men. What about Napoleon?
Well, Napoleon's numbers are significantly smaller. He had about 225,000 troops.
225,000. And fewer guns as well.
Yeah, only around 700 guns compared to the coalition's 1,500. And out of his total force, about 160,000 were actually French.
The rest being allies. Poles, Italians.
Poles, Italians, and crucially, Germans from states like Saxony and Württemberg. And as we just discussed, their loyalty was, well, shaky at best by this point.
But the problem wasn't just numbers, was it? It was the quality of the French troops.
That was a huge factor. Remember Russia. Most of those 160,000 French soldiers were new conscripts. Teenagers, many of them. Inexperienced, poorly trained compared to the veterans lost the year before.
So they'd be more likely to break under pressure.
Exactly. And another critical weakness for Napoleon was his cavalry.
How so?
He just didn't have enough good cavalry left after Russia. The imperial cavalry was depleted. That meant he couldn't scout effectively, couldn't screen his movements properly, couldn't maintain communications easily. Against a converging enemy with superior numbers, that's a massive disadvantage.
So what was Napoleon's plan facing these odds? He couldn't just sit there.
No, definitely not. He planned an offensive, actually. He wanted to use the geography around Leipzig, the way the Pleiss and Parther rivers converged, to his advantage.
How would that work?
Well, the rivers naturally divided the battlefield into sectors north, east, south, and the western Lindenau sector. Napoleon believed he could use his central position in Leipzig and the bridges to shift his troops between these sectors faster than the huge, unwieldy coalition armies could coordinate their encirclement. Interior lines, classic Napoleon.
So hold Leipzig, use the bridges for rapid movement, and try to hit parts of the coalition army before they could fully combine, concentrating his force.
That was the idea. He concentrated his main force around Stoderitz, southeast of the city, hoping to smash the army of Bohemia before Blücher and the others could fully engage.
Makes sense. But what about the coalition's plan? Was it unified?
Well, that's where it gets interesting. You had the commander-in-chief, Schwarzenberg, but you also had three monarchs right there on the scene. Tsar Alexander of Russia, King Frederick William III of Prussia, and Emperor Francis I of Austria.
That sounds like a recipe for arguments.
It absolutely was. There was constant debate, particularly between Tsar Alexander and Schwarzenberg.
About what specifically?
About the main point of attack. Schwarzenberg's initial plan focused the main assault along the Pleiss River, south of Leipzig, with only a secondary effort towards the crucial Lindenau Bridge to the west.
Okay.
But Alexander hated that plan. He thought it was way too cautious. He argued that attacking in the difficult, marshy ground along the Pleiss would bog the army down and allow Napoleon to concentrate and maybe break through somewhere else.
So Alexander wanted a broader attack.
Yes. He was particularly insistent that Blücher needed to attack aggressively from the north to really pin Napoleon down and ensure complete encirclement. He didn't want Napoleon slipping away.
And looking back, who was right?
Well, the early stages of the battle kind of proved Alexander right. The Austrian attacks along the Pleiss, where Schwarzenberg initially wanted to focus, they really struggled, got bogged down, took heavy losses.
While Blücher in the north?
Blücher's attacks in the north, the axis Alexander had pushed for, were much more successful initially.
So they reached a compromise.
Eventually, yeah. Schwarzenberg adjusted the plan. Blücher would indeed attack strongly from the north. The main effort would still be south, but maybe less concentrated on just the Pleiss. And they kept the powerful Russian and Prussian Guard units in reserve at Rotha, ready to be committed where needed.
So it was a plan designed for annihilation, really, a total encirclement.
Absolutely. They weren't just aiming to defeat Napoleon. They were aiming to trap and destroy his entire army. The stage was set for something monumental.
All right. Day 1, October 16th. The battle begins. And despite everything stacked against him, Napoleon fights hard, doesn't he?
Oh, he does. The first day is incredibly bloody, incredibly intense, and it actually ends in something of a tactical draw.
A draw, even with the coalition's numbers.
Well, the French managed to win slight advantages in some sectors, like Lindenau in the west and Wachau in the south. But they took a real hammering up north at Merkern.
So mixed results, but incredibly costly for both sides.
Hugely costly. The Allies lost something like 30,000 men on that first day alone. 30,000.
And the French.
Around 25,000 casualties for the French, including about 2,000 captured. So, yeah, a bloody draw. But, crucially, a draw was really a loss for Napoleon because the Allies had reinforcements pouring in and he didn't.
Okay, let's break down the action. The Southern Front first, Wachau and Liebert-Walkwitz. What happened there?
That was the main focus initially for the coalition's army of Bohemia. The Russians' Second Corps attacked Wachau, but they seemed to have underestimated the French preparations. They walked right into a trap, really, and got badly mauled.
So the Prussians had to go in.
Yeah, the Prussians had to reinforce them, and it descended into really nasty close-quarter street fighting in the villages.
And Liebert-Walkwitz.
A similar story. Fierce fighting, back and forth. The Austrians actually took the village at one point, but Marshal MacDonald led a strong French counterattack and threw them back out. It was incredibly chaotic.
And this is where Napoleon spots an opportunity. The famous Grand Battery.
Exactly. Seeing the Allied center looking a bit shaky after all this fighting, Napoleon ordered his artillery chief, General Drouot, to assemble a massive battery, 150 guns on a rise called Gallows Hill.
Classic Napoleon. Concentrate the firepower.
Absolutely. And those 150 guns just unleashed hell on the exposed Russian Second Corps. They blasted a huge hole right in the Allied line. This was Napoleon's chance for a breakthrough.
And he sends in the cavalry. Murat.
He does. He unleashes Marshal Murat with about 10,000 cavalry, French, Italian, Saxon horsemen aiming straight for that gap.
Should have been decisive, right? 10,000 cavalry?
You'd think so. But Murat makes a critical tactical error. He forms his cavalry up into massive, deep columns.
Why was that bad? Sounds powerful.
It looked powerful, but it was too slow, too cumbersome, too difficult to maneuver. And the coalition cavalry, smaller, more agile units of Russians, Prussians, Austrians, they didn't meet him head on.
What did they do?
They harassed the flanks of Murat's big columns, nipped at them, disrupted their formation, prevented them from building up speed and momentum for that decisive charge.
So the huge charge just fizzled out.
Pretty much. It bogged down. They were driven back towards their own lines, only saved from complete disaster by the elite French Guard dragoons countercharging. But the big breakthrough opportunity, it was lost.
Wow. A major mischance for Napoleon. What about the Young Guard? Did they try?
They did. Later in the day, the Young Guard tried to punch through, but they ran into determined resistance from the Russian Guard infantry and Austrian grenadiers, who formed squares and even overran some French guns. The southern front just couldn't be broken.
Okay, so stalemate in the south. What about the north? Muckern. You said the French took a hammering there.
They really did. While all that was happening in the south, Blücher's army of Silesia was locked in a brutal fight with Marshal Marmont's Sixth Corps at Muckern. This was probably the single most savage engagement of the entire first day.
Why Muckern? What made it so tough?
The village itself was heavily fortified. The French used manor houses, strong garden walls, even loopholed walls for infantry. It was like a fortress.
So grinding, close quarters fighting.
Extremely grinding. It went on for hours, broken down into sort of 4 distinct phases.
Yeah.
At one crucial point, Marmont ordered a cavalry charge to relieve the pressure on his infantry.
Yes.
But the cavalry commander refused the order, a massive error in judgment. It broke the French momentum and allowed the Prussians, who were fighting with incredible ferocity, to keep pressing the attack.
And the cost there?
Horrendous. The battle lasted well into the night. Blücher's Prussians and Russians lost around 9,000 men. Marmont lost 7,000 casualties, plus another 2,000 captured.
And mostly from artillery, you said?
Accounts suggest artillery fire caused the majority of the casualties at Muckern. Just sheer pulverizing firepower in a confined space. A real meat grinder.
Okay, south stalemated, north, a bloody reverse for the French. What about the west, Lindenau?
Lindenau was crucial because it controlled the main road west, Napoleon's line of retreat. The Austrian Third Corps under Goulet attacked there.
Did they break through?
No, Napoleon had detached General Bertrand's Fourth Corps specifically to hold Lindenau, and Bertrand did his job. He held the Austrians off.
But that corps couldn't be used elsewhere.
Exactly. Bertrand's Five Corps was pinned down, holding the escape route. It couldn't be used to reinforce Murat's cavalry charge in the south or to help Marmont in the north. It shows how stretched Napoleon was, fighting on all these fronts simultaneously. Day 1 ends, and he's held on, but barely, and at terrible cost.
So after that incredibly brutal first day, what happens on day 2, October 17th? Is it more of the same?
Actually, no. Day 2 is strangely quiet on the main battlefronts. There were some minor actions, mostly cavalry skirmishes.
Like what?
Well, Blücher, who, by the way, got promoted to field marshal for his tenacious fighting at Muckern the day before he ordered a successful attack by some Russian hussars against a French cavalry corps. It just further cemented the Allies' growing superiority in cavalry.
But no major infantry assaults, no big pushes.
No, it's often called the calm before the storm. And that's pretty accurate. Both sides were likely exhausted, licking their wounds, reorganizing after the carnage of the 16th.
But strategically, something huge happens on the 17th, doesn't it?
Yes. This is the day the strategic balance tips decisively, irrevocably, against Napoleon.
Reinforcement.
Massive reinforcements for the Allies. While Napoleon only received about 14,000 more troops, relatively minor additions.
The coalition gets
a game-changing influx. Bennigsen's army of Poland arrives from the east, and crucially, Bernadotte's army of the north arrives from the north. We're talking about 145,000 fresh troops flooding into the Allied lines.
145,000 fresh troops.
Fresh troops, ready to fight. It completely changes the equation.
What does that do to the overall numbers?
Well, think about it. On day 1, it was roughly maybe 200,000 French, against just over 300,000 allies. Bad odds, but perhaps manageable for Napoleon.
But after the 17th.
After the 17th, and Napoleon still has around 225,000, maybe slightly less after day one's losses. But the Allies now have well over 445,000 troops surrounding him, potentially closer to 500,000 men.
It's overwhelming. The odds are now 2-1 against him.
At least 2-1. And the Allies have superiority in cavalry, superiority in artillery, and now this crushing superiority in sheer numbers. The arithmetic is just undeniable.
So the battle is essentially decided on this quiet day, even though there's no major fighting.
Strategically, yes. The arrival of those reinforcements meant the encirclement was complete and overwhelming. Napoleon was no longer fighting for a decisive victory. From this point on, he had to be thinking about how to escape the trap.
You have to imagine the mood in the French camp. Seeing those endless columns of fresh enemy troops arriving.
It must have been utterly demoralizing. They'd fought so hard on the 16th, bled so much, only to achieve a draw. And then they wake up on the 17th to find the enemy has practically double in strength around them. The writing was well and truly on the wall.
Okay, day 3, October 18th. The numbers are overwhelming. The encirclement is complete. Does Napoleon realize the game is up?
He absolutely does. His first move on the 18th isn't military, it's diplomatic.
Yes.
Or, well, an attempt at diplomacy.
What does he do?
He sends General Mervelt, an Austrian general who had been captured the day before, back to the Allied headquarters.
With a message.
Yes, an offer for an armistice. He proposed peace negotiations, even offering to surrender the French fortresses still holding out along the Oder and Vistula rivers, deep in coalition territory.
What did he want in return?
Just to be allowed to retreat. If they let him pull his army back behind the Saale River, basically escaping the immediate trap, he'd give up those fortresses. It was a desperate gamble.
And the Allies? What did the monarchs, Alexander, Francis, Frederick William, say?
They said no, unanimously. They weren't interested in letting him escape to fight another day. They had him cornered. The numbers were on their side. The momentum was with them. They wanted total victory. Right there, right then.
So, no deal. What happens next?
The Allies launched the grand assault. A massive coordinated attack from pretty much all sides simultaneously. This is the full weight of that 500,000 man army coming down on the French.
Where was the heaviest fighting on this day?
The village of Probstede, southeast of Leipzig. This became the absolute focal point, the scene of the most intense, brutal fighting of the entire battle.
Why Probstede? What was so important about it?
It was the key strong point, the cornerstone of the French southern defensive line. Napoleon knew it was vital and had fortified it heavily. Think high, thick garden walls, houses turned into mini forts. It offered excellent protection for the defenders.
So the Allies attacked it repeatedly?
Relentlessly.
Yeah.
The Prussians, in particular, launched assault after assault, 3 major waves of attack.
And the French held?
They held. The French artillery, especially the elite Imperial Guard artillery, was incredibly effective from Probstede. They just pounded the attacking Prussians and Russians. And whenever the infantry got close, Roscoe-Rossias would launch savage countercharges.
Even the Russians under General Raevski tried, the hero of Borodino.
Yes, Raevski led the final massive assault on Probstede. But even his attack was ultimately driven back by the sheer firepower and determination of the French defenders, particularly the Old Guard who were committed there.
So tactically, holding Probstede was a success for the French.
A tactical success, yes. They held the line against unbelievable pressure. But it was a Pyrrhic victory.
How so?
They poured men and resources into holding it. By nightfall on the 18th, the defenders were utterly exhausted. And crucially, they were running out of ammunition. Sources say the French artillery had only about 20,000 rounds left for the entire army. They couldn't sustain that level of fighting.
Well, Probstede is this inferno. What's happening elsewhere? On the eastern side, Ponsdorf and Schönefeld.
Fierce fighting there, too. Blücher and Bernadotte's armies were pressing hard from the north and east, and this is where those British rockets come into play again.
Congreve rockets.
Yeah. The commander, Captain Bogue, advanced his rocket brigade and fired volleys of rockets directly into the village of Ponsdorf.
What effect did that have?
Apparently, quite a bit of disorder. The noise, the unpredictable trajectory, the fire. It caused chaos among the French defenders, particularly the Saxon troops holding that sector. Sadly, Captain Bogue himself was killed by a French skirmisher shortly after.
And this chaos in Ponsdorf, it leads to something even worse for Napoleon.
It leads to the breaking point, the moment of betrayal, really. Right there, in the middle of the fighting at Ponsdorf, a huge chunk of the Saxon army 5,400 men from General Reinier's the 7th Corps simply marched over and defected to the Allies.
5,400 men just switched sides, mid-battle.
Just like that.
Yeah.
Turned their coats and joined Bernadotte's army. And they were quickly followed by Württemberg cavalry units doing the same thing.
That must have been devastating for the French line.
It completely shattered it. Losing that many men instantly created a massive, gaping hole in the Ponsdorf sector that the French just couldn't plug. It triggered a general collapse on that part of the front.
The psychological impact must have been huge, too. Seeing your allies desert.
Absolutely. It signaled to everyone, especially the other German troops still fighting for Napoleon, that the cause was lost. The empire was crumbling from within.
So with the line breaking, retreat is the only option left.
It's the only option. While all this is happening, General Bertrand in the west finally manages to push the Austrians back from Lindenau, securing that single road westward, the only escape route over the White Ulster River.
So the path is clear, at least for now.
For now. That night, the night of the 18th, Napoleon knows it's over. He makes one last symbolic gesture, promoting the loyal Polish Prince Poniatowski to Marshal of the Empire, right there on the battlefield.
A reward for his loyalty, even in defeat.
Exactly. And then he gives the order, a silent withdrawal. The entire remaining Grande Armée was to slip away westward, across that one bridge, over the White Ulster, under the cover of darkness.
So the retreat begins during the night of the 18th into the 19th. Do the Allies realize straight away?
Not immediately. They only seem to have figured out the French were evacuating around 7 a.m. on the 19th.
And when they did?
They launched everything they had.
Yeah.
A full-scale assault from the north, south, and east, starting between 8 and 9 a.m. They smelled blood. They wanted to crush the retreating army.
But Napoleon left a rear guard, didn't he, to cover the withdrawal?
He did. A substantial force, maybe 30,000 men, under Marshal Oudinot and Marshal MacDonald. Their job was to hold Leipzig itself for as long as possible, to buy time for the main army to get across that single bridge.
So intense street fighting in Leipzig itself.
Absolutely ferocious. House-to-house, street-to-street combat. The rear guard fought desperately, giving ground slowly. Imagine the scene for the civilians trapped in the city.
Yeah.
Just bloody urban warfare raging all around them.
But all the sacrifice by the rear guard, it's ultimately undermined by a mistake, a huge mistake.
A catastrophic failure. And it rests ultimately with Napoleon himself. For some reason, he never ordered the construction of additional temporary bridges over the White Ulster River.
Only one bridge for the entire retreating army.
One single permanent bridge at Lindenau. Everything, troops, wagons, artillery wounded, had to funnel across that one choke point. It was sheer negligence not to build more escape routes.
And then comes the fatal error with destroying that bridge.
Yes. The plan was to blow the bridge after the army and the rear guard had crossed to stop the Allied pursuit. Napoleon apparently gave the order to General Dulloy, an artillery general.
Okay.
Dulloy then delegated the task of actually planting and lighting the charges to a Colonel Montfort.
Still sounds okay if the timing is right.
But then Montfort, incredibly, passed the responsibility down further to a corporal. And crucially, it seems this corporal wasn't properly briefed on the timing, on when the bridge should be blown. He didn't know the rear guard was still fighting in the city.
Oh, no. So what happened?
Around 1 p.m. on the 19th, with Allied troops pressing closer, maybe panicking, the corporal lit the fuses.
While the bridge was still full of French troops?
Packed with retreating French soldiers. And, critically, Oudinot's and MacDonald's rear guard was still fighting fiercely back in Leipzig, completely relying on that bridge for their own escape.
The explosion must have caused absolute chaos.
Utter pandemonium. A complete rout. Thousands of French soldiers were instantly cut off on the Leipzig side of the river.
What happened to them?
Those who weren't killed in the crush or drowned trying to swim were forced to surrender. About 30,000 French soldiers were captured right there, simply because the bridge blew too early.
What about the commanders? Oudinot, MacDonald.
They were lucky. They both managed to swim across the river to safety. Incredible, really.
But Poniatowski, the new marshal.
Prince Poniatowski. Tragically, no. He was already wounded from the previous day's fighting. He tried to swim his horse across the river, but he didn't make it. He drowned. A marshal of France for barely 24 hours.
Unbelievable. A single mistake, a failure of delegation, and it turns a difficult retreat into an absolute catastrophe.
Precisely. It sealed the fate of thousands and turned a massive defeat into a truly annihilating one. The Battle of Nations ended not just in retreat, but in chaos and disaster for the French.
So the fighting finally ends on the 19th with that disaster at the bridge. Let's just recap the sheer cost of this battle. It was the bloodiest of the Napoleonic Wars, wasn't it?
Without a doubt. The scale of the losses is just horrific, even by the standards of the era.
For Napoleon's army.
Okay, Napoleon lost around 38,000 men killed or wounded, but on top of that, another 46,000 were captured.
46,000 captured, mostly because of the bridge incident.
A huge number, yeah. That figure includes about 15,000 who were still fit to fight, plus 21,000 sick or wounded who couldn't escape. And they lost over 300 cannons, 325 guns.
Now the leadership.
Decimated. 6 French generals killed in action, another 12 wounded, and 36 French generals were captured. Think about that, 36 generals, including corps commanders like Loris Dist and Reynier. The command structure was just gutted.
What about the Allies? They won, but at what cost?
They suffered terribly too, of course. Total Allied casualties were around 54,000 killed and wounded.
54,000? That's enormous.
It is. Schwarzenberg's army of Bohemia took the brunt of it, losing about 34,000 men. Blücher's army lost around 12,000. The armies of the North and Poland lost about 4,000 each. The victory was incredibly costly for them as well.
The sheer scale of the dead and wounded. The aftermath must have been gruesome.
Unimaginable. Accounts talk about the fields being littered with bodies for months afterwards. Some reports even say corpses were still visible the following spring. Dealing with that many casualties in one place was simply overwhelming.
Okay, beyond the human cost, what were the immediate strategic consequences?
Totally decisive, irreversible. Firstly, the French Empire's control east of the Rhine River was finished. Gone. Kaput.
And the German states that had been allied with Napoleon?
They immediately switched sides. Baden, Saxony, despite the defection earlier, Württemberg, they all formally joined the coalition. Napoleon's German power base evaporated overnight.
And his reputation, his aura of invincibility.
Shattered. This was the second massive army he'd lost in just 2 years, the Grande Armée in Russia in 1812, and now this new army destroyed in Germany in 1813. People saw he could be beaten, decisively beaten.
And the Allies didn't stop there, did they? Tsar Alexander pushed them on.
He was adamant. He successfully persuaded the other allies that they had to carry the war directly onto French soil immediately. No more letting Napoleon regroup.
Yeah. So even though Napoleon won a small battle at Hanau during the retreat.
Yeah, a minor tactical victory, but it didn't matter strategically. He had lost 500,000 men throughout the 1813 German campaign. The French state simply couldn't sustain those kinds of losses anymore.
There's that famous quote from him when he got back to Paris, isn't there?
Yes. Reportedly, he told the Senate, "A year ago, all Europe marched with us. Today, all Europe marches against us." He knew the tide had completely turned. The psychological shift was total.
And the inevitable followed.
Pretty quickly. By early 1814, the coalition armies invaded France itself. Paris fell relatively quickly. Napoleon was forced to abdicate in April 1814 and was exiled to Elba in May. Leipzig was the absolutely critical, irreversible turning point that led directly to that outcome.
And the legacy today. How is Leipzig remembered?
It's remembered primarily through the name, the Battle of Nations, emphasizing that multinational aspect, and physically, most famously, by the huge monument to the Battle of the Nations, the Völkerschlachtdenkmal.
That massive stone monument near Leipzig.
That's the one. 91 meters high, finished in 1913 for the centenary. It's incredibly imposing. And scattered around the actual battlefield, there are also about 50 smaller markers called Apel stones.
What do they mark?
They show the positions of the various French and Allied troop formations during the battle. So you can actually walk the ground and get a sense of where things happened during those 4 days. It helps bring that history to life.
Okay, so we've walked through the 4 days, the context, the horrific cost. If you had to boil it down, what fundamentally decided the Battle of the Nations?
Well, I think it comes down to maybe 3 key things stacking up against Napoleon.
Okay.
First, you have the coalition strategy. That Trachenberg Plan, avoiding Napoleon, hitting his marshals, the systematic attrition, it worked perfectly to weaken him before the main event.
Right, he's already on the back foot.
Exactly. Second, the sheer crushing weight of Allied numbers, especially those 145,000 fresh troops arriving on day 2. That just made the military situation impossible for the French. The odds became insurmountable.
And the third factor?
The third, I think, has to be that final catastrophic blunder on day 4. The failure to prepare adequate escape routes, and the premature destruction of that single bridge over the Ulster.
That turned a defeat into a rout.
Absolutely. It was pure logistical negligence that led to the capture or death of tens of thousands of soldiers who might otherwise have escaped. It completed the physical encirclement with a kind of psychological annihilation, too.
So we see this moment where European unity, however fractious it was between Russia, Prussia, Austria. That unity was absolutely necessary to finally bring down Napoleon's empire.
Yes, Leipzig demonstrated what that united front could achieve. But it also established a new scale of warfare, didn't it? That concentration of firepower, the mass casualties, it was a terrifying glimpse of the industrial slaughter that would define World War I a century later.
Yeah, a sobering thought. So, for a battle that really did reshape the map of Europe, led to Napoleon's first abdication, and set the stage for the next century, it's fascinating and maybe a little disturbing to think how much of that final decisive outcome hinged on one specific moment.
That single fatal error.
Yeah. How much of Napoleon's ultimate downfall at Leipzig was sealed by the accidental or panicked action of one unnamed corporal lighting a fuse just a little too soon? That's definitely something to think about.